training floor for our sword fighting. Over at the mats, we do our children's classes. They're called the Dragon Slayers. That's also where we do our grappling and dagger classes. Over this way, behind these blue curtains, we have an airsoft field. All of these walls are mobile walls that allow us to change the layout of the airsoft floor so that on game days, it's never the same map. So nobody can memorize the layout of the map. It's always a new game every month. I don't know that I've ever heard of any other airsoft fields that have mobile walls that allow them to do this. And our airsoft floor also doubles as an archery range and axe throwing target when we're not doing airsoft. We don't combine the two. Then if we go this way, one of my favorite rooms is our library, because hitting things is easy. Understanding when, why, where, and how is what makes it an art. And so we have books on martial systems. We have books on arms and armor. We have books on duels and battles throughout history. We have an entire section on Celtic. We have a whole section on nautical. We even have a whole section on costuming, art, signs and symbols in artwork. So we can look at more than just swinging a sword or a stick at other people. This tells us how and why, not just how to do it. I can. It's easy to do that. One of my favorite historical characters is a guy called John Hawkwood, who was a mercenary captain of the White Company during the 1360s to 1380s. And the more I'd read about him, and then he was contemporary with Chaucer, which would lead you down studying Chaucer and other people in the arts around that period. So it gets more from just the martial side to the art, but also to the fashion. How did they dress? Why did they dress that way? What symbolism did these articles of clothing have for this time period? So it's easy to go down a rabbit hole, and especially once you see how all of these characters in these different books are intertwined through this one time period. And then if we step this way, this armor all along this blue curtain for our airsoft field is all combat armor. We actually get into armor and train every Wednesday night. And then if we go this way, my other favorite room is our armory. I have fought with one version of everything in this room. That I have used. The Flamberge longsword over here, this one is my first sword that I fought with in tournaments. So that one I spent many years fighting with. The long swords over here, I fought with a number of those long swords. When I was learning tomahawking knife. I met one of my very good friends on board a two-story river ship in Detroit, where we were doing a pirate boarding action. And I met him when he tried to throw me off the side of the boat. And we've been good friends ever since.
Which reminds me of a story you told during our regular interview, about the doctor who came in and treated you. He wasn't the one that hit you during the course of battle.
Oh, in the UK.
Yes.
Yes, when I got knocked to the ground in my helmet, it was actually this helmet right here. I was wearing this helmet in a reenactment, and when I got knocked down, it did this and drove the rim into the bridge of my nose. And I went to the medic's tent, and I had to wait for the doctor to come off the field with his sword and helmet before he could take a look at my nose and tell me that it's just split open. I don't need any stitches or anything. But it made my wife happy that I went to see the doc.
Yeah, it's amazing how we always please the other side there.
I know who the boss is.
Steaphen, thank you again.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
With the word merits, I think you're talking about levels or ranks.
Yes.
We do have multiple ranks in each discipline in our school. Our ranking system is based upon an illustration from the manuscript written in 1409 by Master Fior de la Berry. And our longsword rank has our longsword curriculum has about 13 ranks. Our sword and shield has 6 or 7 ranks. Our rapier has about 8. So there are multiple ranks that you can go through. But you think of each level as building part of a ladder that you're going to stick onto another ladder. You can't reach any skill without climbing up the previous skill sets that you've already set into that ladder. There is not any one weapon that somebody has to start with. We are a principle-based school. So you will see the same principles and concepts throughout all the different systems that we teach here. Fundamentally, they are all built off of the same foundation. There will be differences in each system because of the type of tool you're using, the distance you're working at, the leverage that you have. But ultimately, if you break it all down, fundamentally, it's all the same. And if you look at any skill set in any art, whether it's martial arts or professional tennis players or professional musicians, they always start with the scales or the fundamentals. And everything is built off of those fundamentals. If you talk to somebody who is a professional singer, they warm up with voice scales. If you talk to a professional pianist, they warm up with the scales on their instrument. For our martial arts here, we warm up with our fundamentals. And the fundamental of your art, your activity, is whatever you practice the most. You have made that your fundamental. Whether it's a good fundamental or not is unimportant in the scheme of things, because the fundamental is whatever you practice the most. What we're looking at there is structure. And structure always moves from the ground up, because the earth is as solid as we're going to get right now, hopefully. Standing on quicksand, that's a different thing. But hopefully what you're fighting on is the ground, and that is as strong as you're going to get. So your structure moves from that up. Feet, knees, hips, shoulder, tool. Whether that tool is your fists, a knife, a sword, a spear, or a gun, you start from the foundation of the earth. And by lining things up in your body, you are no longer using the strength of your muscles, but the structure of your skeleton. Because no matter how strong you are, how young you are, how fit you are, you're going to get tired. You're going to get injured. You're going to get old. But if you learn to use your skeleton, no matter what your muscles are doing at that moment, you will always have the structure through a hard system connected to the earth. Most people think that one of the key ingredients of any martial art is speed. And speed is important, but speed is only one tool. The example I like to use is if somebody's holding up their hand and the other person is punching it, and they're punching it very slowly, I'll ask them, how fast are you moving? And they'll say, very slowly. But in truth, we are moving hundreds of thousands of kilometers per hour, because we're on a giant rock hurtling through space. It's not how fast you move, it's how far of a distance you move. Even if I'm fighting somebody who's younger than me, in better shape than me, less injuries than me, they will be faster. But if I can find a way to make them have to move a further distance than I need to move, I will have the advantage. So speed comes through not necessarily always being faster than the other person, but positioning yourself in such a way through footwork or movement so that the other person is slower than you, because they need to travel a greater distance. That happens all the time. There are so many things happening all at once that imagine your mind as a file cabinet. You open up the drawer and you start sifting through the folders looking for what you're looking for, the technique you want or the distance you want. And while we're sifting through those folders, the other people are still doing things. So it's easy to overthink something. I like to tell my guys here, you don't need to know everything. You only need to know 3 or 4 things and be really good at those 3 or 4 things, and they will answer most questions posed. And I say it that way because I teach in the Socratic method. If you and I are having a fight, I'm going to pose a question to you. I'm going to wait for your response so I can pose another question to you until you are unable to answer my question. And that inability to answer my question would be the hit. But if I'm unable to answer your question, I got hit. So I very much teach in the Socratic method versus memorization or pure repetition. I want you to know why you're doing it so you can choose what works best for you and the best way that you can communicate with another person, whether it's verbally or physically. We are always our worst enemy. We are taught from youngest age not to trust ourselves, to trust somebody else. One of my favorite examples for this is, how many times have you talked yourself out of the correct answer on a test at school? Because we don't trust ourselves. And if you don't trust yourself, how can you believe in yourself? Once we learn to trust ourselves and to go with our first instinct and realize that it's almost always right, that takes a lot of pressure off of us, mentally and emotionally. And as you're practicing this art, because there's not a lot of time in the actions, you can't overthink it without falling behind in time. So you have to go with your first instinct. And we spend a lot of time learning how to trust ourselves. And we do the repetition so that we can just go with our first instinct and not second guess ourselves. I've told my students out here on the floor that ultimately sword fighting doesn't matter. It's the 21st century. Martial arts, fighting your way out of things for 95, 99% of your life is never going to matter. What it does is it gives you a place to go, a community to be a part of. What I am happiest about with our school here, we do have fantastic competitors. We have students that can go to other schools, absorb what they're giving, incorporate it, and share what they have. But most importantly, what we have here is the ability to gather together and really learn who we are and how we fit into the community. I am most proud that I've had 3 marriages come out of the school and multiple lifelong friendships. It's that sense of community, that ability to be a part of something larger than yourself that will carry on. When you and I are gone, the way we continue to live on is through the stories told about us. I want those stories to be good about me. And I want people to remember me as giving all of them a place where they could be comfortable in their skin and realize that they are good human beings who are worth time and effort and are a pleasure to be in a relationship with. Yeah, there's been multiple times where one student has had vehicle issues and other people volunteered to drive them around just wherever they needed to be because we help each other. We had different people take time out of their day to help another person here get to the doctor when even their own family wasn't able to take time away to get them there. We just lost one of our members to cancer. And we're about, the memorial is about 2 hours north of where the school is. On a Friday afternoon, during the week, at 4 o'clock, 2 hours north of where we all are, we still had 12 to 14 people there with the family, supporting the family. That's what I love about this group. I think an important thing to look at when you're looking at visiting schools and other clubs, first and foremost, what is the attitude of the instructor? Does it feel like they have something to prove? Or do they legitimately want to just give you information? When I say give you information, that doesn't mean you're not paying them. I mean, they want to share what they've got. Or do they want to be the apex of the school, so everybody's below them? My goal is to get beat by my students. I will tell you, I hate losing to my students, but that's my goal. When I lose in a fight to my students, that means they and I have done a good job. Because I don't need to be the apex. I need to help them become better. So look for that. Look for somebody who always takes your safety into account. We have a general rule here for fencing masks. If there's ever a question about fencing masks, the answer is yes. You put it on. You never swing a sword at somebody without first asking their permission, at least at the beginning of the drill. Then you don't need to ask every time, but you need to let them know that you're going to be swinging a sword at them, because I don't know what their twitch factor is. And they might twitch into the blow or away from it, or twitch so that they knock it into somebody else. So look for an instructor who takes safety seriously. Again, it's the 21st century, not the 12th century. We are not living under the same martial rules in today's world that they were in the 15th century. And look for a school that supports one another. If you have a group of people that the leaders are setting them to backbite one another in a non-healthy competition setting, run away. Competition is great, but it needs to be done in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way. So those would be the main things I would say to look for. And visit our YouTube channel for some videos that we have up on there as well. But understand, you can only learn so much from a video or a book. You need to have a master, somebody that's outside of your body, so they can see and tell you what they're seeing, because we can't see outside of ourselves.
My name's Debbie Barnes. I grew up in Sacramento and moved to San Jose about 25 years ago or so.
And you haven't ran away yet.
No,
No.
Believe it or not. I started out doing Renaissance fairs with a reenactment group, and Steaphen and his group would be also out there at fair. When my group dissolved, I started taking more classes here and just stuck around ever since. you're always learning around here. There's always something to learn. And the people here, they're second family.
Yes.
That is one thing I have relied on many times. You know, when something's come up outside of the school, I have friends here that I know I can count on. So it kind of carries over to training here because you can trust the person you're training with who's swinging a big stick at your head. We're all from different walks of life, but we also still have kind of that same geeky nerd concept in common. So, you know, whether you're like a Lord of the Rings fan or a Star Wars fan, all that geekiness is okay to talk about, whereas maybe outside of the school, you can't really talk about it at work or maybe if you're going to school, things like that. So we have like a common bond, and most of us, I think, have this never want to grow up. Yeah, so that it's like, okay, yes, we still play with swords and we still have fun, and nobody makes fun of anybody because that's what they still want to do. I'd say after doing their Google search, look for a school that will let you come in and maybe try out a class or something without having to sign up and pay for classes. Because that's a sign of an instructor who I would say has confidence in his school and is willing to work with a lot of people. So letting you try out different things, see how you fit in and mesh with the group would be the good thing before they make you sign everything on the dotted line.
So my name is James Peters, and I'm from Campbell, California originally. Yeah, sure. So I started my swordsmanship journey actually at West Valley Community College in Saratoga, California, in the fencing program they had there. So it was foil fencing, predominantly recreational more than it was competitive, which I appreciated because ever since playing Soul Calibur 2 in like late high school and being fascinated with Raphael and his rapier work, I wanted to learn how to sword fight. I've always been around swords and video games and things like that. I was like, I want to learn how to do that. And unfortunately, the best option was fencing. And we had a fantastic instructor, June Ambrose, who taught fencing with the spirit of swordsmanship rather than the spirit of how to win a competition. Right? So she wanted people to look at fencing as the art of swordsmanship, as the art of fence, where you were focused on proper position, proper posture. You were dueling rather than whipping your bendy blade, because if you whip the blade, then the blade is bent, and if the point touches your opponent, then the blade is bent and it's touching your opponent, and technically that gets you a point. That has nothing to do with real sword fighting whatsoever, and that's not the way she taught. And I really enjoyed that. And in addition, she brought in this crazy guy every semester to give a lecture on antique weapons and their use. And he would come in with long swords, what we now often call the side sword, rapier, some pole arms, and bring in bits of armor. And we'd get to pick those up, handle them around. He'd show how they could be used, how they were used, talk about their history. And I always fell in love with that. And eventually, after a couple of years, he was doing this every semester. I would be the one to go meet him at the parking lot and chat with him and take him over to the room. And eventually I started taking classes with him. And that was Steaphen Fick. And that's when I started, probably in 2011 at the Davenriche European Martial Arts School, which at this point was over in Santa Clara 2 moves ago. So we've moved twice since I started studying with Steaphen. So for the majority of my undergraduate, I studied at Temple University, Japan, which is a branch campus of Temple University in Philadelphia, just located at the time in Minato-ku in Tokyo. It has since moved to Setagayaku. And now it actually has dedicated club spaces, which we sadly didn't have when I was there. So we were practicing in the cafeteria, and I was teaching primarily longsword, dagger, and grappling curriculum, based on the works of Fiore de Liberi. And in addition to regular longsword classes, I ran workshops on combat with the umbrella, either the traditional hook-handled umbrella or even the little short compact ones, adapting techniques from the 1400s for sword in one hand, sword in two hands, dagger, and even half-swording, anti-armor fighting for the use with the umbrella as a way to kind of get people to think outside of, oh, what if I don't have a sword? How do I use it? And I really enjoyed that. I also had the opportunity to compete in tournaments run at Castleton Tajel, which is a German-style sword school in Tokyo, run by Jay Noyes. And I competed in and won several longsword and sword and buckler tournaments while I was over there. And I was also fortunate enough to be allowed to help them with some of their events. I got to help actual samurai who are dressing up in metal armor to go fight with metal swords, help them get kitted up, and it was a really, really neat experience being there. So I am a huge fan of the quarterstaff workshops that we do. Because the quarterstaff can be applied to a spear, a stick, a poleaxe, a variety of weapons. And because there's something really pure about here's how to use a stick which is arguably humanity's oldest weapon. All right. But we're looking at it from the standpoint of here's the science they had up until the 1400s on how this works. And now we're applying modern science as well, modern physics, understanding how to generate power with your body, understanding, just how much a tiny bit of rotational force down here extends to the end of your stick. And also getting out of some of the misconceptions that you have about full weapons. I remember when I was finally getting an opportunity to spar with quarterstaff, there are a lot of guards where you're holding the staff out in front of you, or it's at an angle, and you feel like, well, if somebody swings something at me, it's just going to slide up the stick and hit my hands. And if you're moving at super slow practicing speeds, that does happen. But as soon as somebody is legitimately swinging a sword or an axe or some other tool at you, and you put your pole arm up in one of these positions, it pretty much stops when it hits your pole arm, or stops and bounces off. It doesn't just keep sliding. And it was an opportunity to really put some of these things to the test that like you learn and you practice, and until you actually go out and do them at speed and trust in them, there's really nothing like having a technique that you've practiced and then stepping into an attack and saying to yourself, well, this should work and I'm going to trust it, and it does. It's really a great feeling. It's that perfect culmination of theory, practice, and reality, and there's really nothing like it. I unfortunately have not been able to make it to any of the workshops that our guest instructors have run, just either because of my work schedule, or for a while I was in between my old job working in the video game industry and my current job working in the state parks. I wasn't really able to make time for the workshops as I wanted. I've had the opportunity to meet Anthony DeLongis, but just in passing while he was here for another workshop that he was taking. And unfortunately, I just didn't get much chance to hang out with these guys. Sure. So I'll start with everyone's favorite, or at least everyone who's correct, the longsword. All right. And this is what I spend most of my time working with. This is the weapon that I teach. This particular weapon is a lovingly crafted Frankensword made of several different parts from several different swords. The only original piece on this from when I first bought my first steel fighting sword is the guard, which is from a Hanwei Rhinelander bastard sword. I purchased it probably back in 2012, found that I didn't care for the balance, so I purchased the Hanwei Tinker blunt longsword blade that you see here. Not this particular one, this is a replacement. And so I found that this guard mated perfectly to that blade. It just meant that I needed a new pommel because the original pommel was cleaned, and I needed a new handle. So I spent time with another student in his workshop making a new handle, and he had an extra pommel sitting around. So I used that for a while. Eventually, I moved on to a pommel I purchased from Printed Armory, which is made to fit these particular blades. And the handle here is actually a 3D printed PETG plastic wrapped in leather. And I love that because these handles get beat up a lot when we're fighting. And it's really nice to be able to come home someday and be like, I'm going to need a new handle, and print one out and have one ready to go the next day, wrap it up in leather. It looks good. It's not the most historical thing on the planet. The design is historical and based off historical pieces, but it's something that works really well for me, and so it's what I've kept doing. The blade, as I said, is a Hanwei Rhineland. I'm sorry, this is the Hanwei Tinker longsword blunt. When I started fencing in 2010, 2011, with the longsword. These were the go-to blades. Nowadays, a lot of folks like fetters, or there are other blades that actually look and function like a sword, unlike a fetter, out that you can get. I still love these. The flex on them is very solid, and yet they're very, very durable. I like the sword. We talk about it being 3 weapons in one. You've got your blade for dealing with unarmored peasants, all right, people who didn't have the good sense to put on some armor before coming out to meet you on the battlefield. And your blade is good for carving through those like nobody's business. If you encounter somebody who has a little bit more common sense and realistically more resources with which to armor themselves, then we talk about switching over to your secondary weapon, which is the dagger. We move to the half swording grip, and you'll see the half swording grip here is just about where same length as my dagger. So now I can use this as a precision stabbing tool to get into gaps under the armpit, into the visor, all sorts of fun stuff, as well as using it as a wrestling stick for binding up under the elbow, throwing people on the ground, all sorts of delightful stuff. I'd be remiss if I did not remind people that you can throw swords. And throwing swords is a delight, and I encourage that everyone do it. I can hit a human-sized target at 10 meters with this thing, and it's really, really funny when you pull that off in the middle of a match. Someone thinks they're out of distance. They're not. So that's a little bit about the longsword. That's what I love. I do also take a dagger on my belt when I'm fighting. This one is by Darkwood Armory. It is another, I believe it's their, they call it their practical rondelle. It is one of my favorite fencing tools because it is inexpensive, solidly built, open to customization. You can pull this whole thing apart and remount the blade in whatever setting you want. I keep mine with a rondelle dagger, which is the kind of dagger that would have been used, from I think mid 1200s, even into the late 1400s. It is a fighting dagger, first and foremost. It is made to stab. It is made to go through layers of cloth, made to go through mail. Arguably, some people have shown if you position and punch it right, you can get through some solid plates of steel. Whether or not I would rely on that, the jury's out. Here, the thing I love about this dagger is it is one of the flexiest steel daggers I have found. I can stab my friends with this all day long, and they're still my friends at the end of the day. And to me, that's kind of what it's all about. I have countless videos of closing into grappling, drawing a dagger, and stabbing somebody in a longsword fight, because you're only in a longsword fight as long as you both agree you're in a longsword fight. Sometimes I just change it to a dagger fight without telling them. So if you're going into battle with just one weapon, bring a dagger. They're so much fun. They open up so much more opportunity. And we are so fortunate to have a huge industry of quality training tools out here now. Again, when I started, there were no steel bendy daggers. It was either a cold steel rubber combat knife or a probably 6mm thick steel bar that had no flex, and you just had to be real nice with it. Well, there are 3 schools, actually 4 other schools in the U.S. that I have a little bit of experience with that I would happily recommend to people. One is San Diego Longsword with Scott Farrell. It's a German-style school, so it's going to be different from the Fiore work we focus on here. But Scott is an amazing instructor. I met him at the Armitsari Academy in Wisconsin in 2021, which was a 3-day workshop all about Fiore and Italian Armitsari fighting. And he taught me some really, really great training drills and ways to create games for training. So definitely check out his work. The Northwest Fencing Academy, Sean Hayes and Ryan Vaughn up in Eugene, Oregon. I was fortunate enough to spend the whole month of February 2022 up in Eugene, Oregon, studying with them, taking every single class I could get from them. They are another fantastic Fiore school. Some of their interpretations differ from the way we do things here, but you will be hard pressed to find someone who can articulate exactly why they interpret things the way they do more than Sean Hayes. Fantastic instructor. He has a YouTube channel full of really, really good quality content. I'd recommend looking into that. And lastly, anyone involved with the Chicago Swordplay Guild over in Chicago. Another wonderful, Forteza Fitness is another great group over there. They are another Fiore-focused school, and that's what I like to get people into is Fiore, because Fiore has a whole functional system in his art, and that's kind of what draws me to it. As for what I would recommend checking up on if you just find a school, you're walking down the street and you see something that says, you know, HEMA or historical martial arts or something like that. First, I'd ask, hey, what do you study? Ask if they can name a master or two that they draw their interpretations from. Some groups are going to try and combine everything together. That's not really the way that I like to approach things, but it's not wrong. Usually you'll get them telling you they're either German school, Lichtenauer or Meyer or Mayer, or they're an Italian school, usually going to be Fiore. I have yet to meet a Vadi-focused school. So ask if they can name some of their sources, all right? And then you can go look those up on the Lichtenauer, all right? See how much information you have about those sources. Secondly, Google Sensei is helpful, all right? Look up their instructor, look up their school, see what their background is, how long they've been around. We don't really have lineages in Western martial arts the same way we do in East Asian martial arts, but you'll start to see some names pop up. Maybe they've studied with someone like Steaphen or Sean Hayes or one of the other groups that I've mentioned, or they've worked with Angel DeLongis or Jared Kirby or someone else who's very serious about their martial art and passionate about teaching. That's going to be kind of the main thing is find out where they learned, right? But honestly, the most important thing if you're going to get into any martial art, East Asian, Western, African, which is another amazing field that people are diving into these days, is the vibe good? Do you feel comfortable? Are they making space for people like you? Are they making space for people who aren't like you? Are they making space for people who aren't like them? Are they doing this and approaching this out of love? Or are they approaching this out of a desire to, prove themselves on the field of battle that just doesn't exist anymore? That's what I would look into.
My name is Jocelyn, and I am actually just from the Bay Area. I'm a San Jose resident. Actually, it started with my dad. He started here first. He found it, and then my mom got interested, and then I got interested because swords. I want to do swords, so. And I followed in my friend's footsteps. Got a good community, so that's what keeps people coming. new people, and also I just want to also help others learn as well because I started here so young.
My name is Phoenix. I currently live in the San Jose area. I'm originally from the New York area.
Okay.
My pronouns are they, them. Well, it's something I'd always been interested in. I thought would be neat since I was a little kid, but I didn't know it was really a thing, something that was available that I could do. And I've been coming here about 7 years, but about 7 years ago, my daughter was really getting into Star Wars, and we were doing some playing with some lightsaber stuff, and she's like, oh, I'd like to learn sword stuff. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if they have any kids classes. Got online, did a search, found the Dragon Slayers class here, and they went, oh, there's a whole school that teaches this stuff. I've always wanted to learn that stuff, so I signed myself up too, and I've been here ever since. She comes back and forth. She did it for many years, but she's also heavily involved in dance, and she sometimes competes in dances. Sometimes she's busy with that and not here, but in between she'll come back on and off. Yes. Well, everyone was very encouraging and supportive, and very inclusive as well. So I was coming in without a whole lot of background doing physical activities. And they were encouraging anyways, even though I was obviously starting, kind of at the very ground level. It was always about helping people where they were with what their goals were, rather than you should be doing this or at this level. And so it was the fact that everyone was so supportive. Yeah. So I am non-binary, okay. Which means I don't feel fully female or fully male. So I'm kind of in this middle ground, which is why I've chosen the pronouns they, them. It reflects that.
by the inclusiveness of here is a very important part, because I've always felt I could be openly who I am without judgment and accepted for who I am, and don't feel like I have to be scared to be who I am based on how someone may react. We have a lot of students here, they're in the LGBT plus community, and this place has always been extremely welcoming of everyone, and it's been a safe place for us to be. Okay, so I'm going to be participating in the rapier tournament. So they have part of Combat Con is they have tournaments for various weapons. There's longsword, sword and shield, rapier, and some people choose to sign up and compete against people from other places that have come in for Combat Con. This will be my first tournament I've ever been in. So excited and nervous because it's a big step in my growth in a whole lot of ways. For me, I'm stepping in for the experience of doing it to challenge myself, to put myself in a position that is novel for me and therefore a little bit uncomfortable, to see how I do and to stretch. I think because it's a supportive community, and that's part of the keyword, community, people here tend to really look out for each other and support each other, not just on the training floor, but outside of that. I know when I've had difficult times, people, friends from the school have reached out to help me, and I've done the same for other people. You know, they have events that are social, like the feast and stuff, where we can just hang out and be with each other and talk. There's the haunted house that we put on, which is mostly a community building thing that we do in October. So it's not just about learning swords, it's also about those connections with the other people.